Welcome to SNN Network Summer Virtual Event. We are pleased to introduce the next presenter from today's event, Don Trabelsi, President and CEO of SuperCom. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for joining our investor presentation today. Go here. Safe harbor statement. Moving over to slide 3. Great. So SuperCom is a global technology security company. We provide cybersecurity solutions to governments around the world. We've been doing that since 1988. And today our focus is mainly on IoT tracking solutions, essentially house arrest or offender monitoring. We also have 2 other business segments, which are more minor and less of our focus, which is secure identification. Essentially, we help governments print biometric ID cards, driver's licenses, ID cards, and so forth. And we also provide security to enterprises through software that runs on all their laptops and endpoints to prevent from data leaking out and viruses entering through their cybersecurity division as well. Some investment highlights. So we've been expanding very rapidly and aggressively in our IoT tracking division through many new multi-year government projects. Since 2018, we have secured 30 new projects most of which are still running today. Most of these projects run for 5 years until they're up for renewal, and then we have the same customers sometimes for 10, even 15 and 20 years. We're gaining traction with our new solution for COVID-19 quarantine compliance. There's various interests from governments around the world, and we also won an RFP for a project with this technology in Israel back in March 2021. In our tracking of offender space, we have superior technology, which has been leading to over 65% win rate in all the RFPs in Europe. There's 10 players in the industry, and we alone, as one, have 65% win rate. That's higher than all the other 9 put together. We have some cost optimizations and increases to our profitability. And our EBITDA has been increasing lately from Q1 to Q2 in 2021 with a 6-month EBITDA of $1.3 million. We have secured 119 patents behind our technology capabilities, and we have insider ownership of roughly 18%. What's interesting is that most of our revenues are steady state by nature and recurring by nature. You can see how they're composed. Firstly, we have software as a service. When we track offenders, we provide the full kit, which we'll see soon. But essentially, for every bracelet on someone's leg, we get the bill per unit per day. And that creates a consistent revenue stream. Similar to that of software as a service, we're also providing our software on the cloud, which manages all the events of these offenders, but together with the hardware that we lease. We also receive maintenance revenues for all of our projects. Consumables, if you're printing ID cards or laminates or passport, we provide the booklets and the base cards to print on. We'll start by understanding our IoT tracking market and drivers that are pushing this market. So first of all, it's roughly a multi-billion-dollar market. We're looking at roughly $2 billion around the world. There are very high barriers to entry. If Google or Apple wanted to bid on our RFP in the space, they simply could not, because the requirement is to have 5 to 10 years of experience in most of these RFPs doing exactly this kind of work, using your technology to track offenders at home. And we've been doing this for a very long time, also inherently at SuperCom and also through the companies we acquired, such as LCA out of California, that's been doing this, providing these tracking services since 1991. We have grown across Europe, U.S., and also are looking at Latin America, where this industry is continuously expanding into. And what's driving this industry is a few different factors. Firstly, there's a whole notion of recidivism. People go into prison, sometimes for misdemeanor crimes. They learn how to become great criminals, and they come out sometimes losing ties with their family and friends. It's harder for them to find a job, and they likely are to recommit and go right back into prison. And these prisons can't have room for this inflating population, and so the prisons are heavily overcrowded. Also, there's heightened budgetary pressures around this. It costs $100 to $140 a day just to keep someone in federal or state prison. When you send them home for house arrest, the full price for the technology and the personnel who are running the technology is $10 to $35 a day. So significant cost savings by pushing people out to house arrest. And also the technology these days is much more advanced than it was 20, 30 years ago when you started with tracking of house arrest. Now we have accurate location points, longer battery life, more reliable hardware and technology. And you could see growth on almost every single region in the world. California State, for example, 15 years ago was a project of 200 units per day. Now there are over 10,000 active units daily. Similarly, in Florida State, if you look at other counties and municipalities in the U.S., in Europe, and so forth. Going on the next slide here, you can see a little bit more about our solution. So we have an industry-leading comprehensive tracking platform that includes the hardware and includes the software that runs on the cloud. We won 30 new government projects since 2018, and this is an increasing source of high-margin recurring revenue for us. For every additional unit we put on an existing region, let's say we're looking at the U.S., we already have our fixed costs down, the monitoring and support, the inventory management. So every additional unit has very high margins. We offer real-time monitoring, so they know exactly where the offenders are at any given moment. And this effectively reduces recidivism and increases offenders' accountability. We also provide complementary services. So if someone comes out of prison and they're looking for a job or to reconnect with their family, we provide those services as well for our government customers to really help with re-entry into society and to reduce recidivism rates. You can see here our technology suite. Everything is developed proprietarily in-house, the software, the hardware. We use a Samsung phone, of course, that we purchased through Samsung. This phone has been manufactured in hundreds of millions of units, bringing us great scale and economies of scale. And also, they always update it with the newest technology and capabilities in location and energy efficiencies. So we're able to leverage the phone and offer a whole new plethora of capabilities. If any of you have tried an ankle bracelet in the past for one reason or other, you know that it's probably very different from what you see on the slide here today. It's typically a brick, a very heavy piece of hardware that runs on someone's leg. And there's no screen, there's no audio communication, there's no video communication. It's just a brick on your leg, and you're required to charge that brick every day. Most of the technologies out there today, you have to charge every day. So if the person doesn't sit 2 hours next to the wall, connecting their leg to the wall like a cyborg, then their system is not going to work, and they're going to be off the program very quickly. With our solution, the PureTag bracelet that you see here, it's very lightweight. You can put it underneath your sock. It's really small, tiniest in the industry, and the battery life runs for years. You never have to charge it as an offender. You don't have to worry about that at all, and it provides a much more effective experience for the user and also for the agents who are monitoring the offenders. We have biometric capabilities on the house unit. We have the smartphone, which allows for video conferencing, for texting, for other capabilities. You can see here, must stay home. It tells them at any given time where they need to be. Are they allowed to be at work in these hours? Are they allowed to go out to meet their bail agent or their officer at these hours, and so forth? And this, at the end, leads to more effective programs and more effective results. In the middle, you see the software that runs on the cloud, by the way. As we said earlier, we've had very effective win rates in Europe, which was the initial focus of the company. Now we're entering more into the U.S. and later into South America and other regions of the world. But in Europe, where we started, we have had increasingly high win rate, over 65%. You can see some of the countries where we entered, including Armenia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Latvia, Sweden. What's interesting here is a lot of these nations had a provider of electronic monitoring, whether it's 3M or G4S or a 10T or another provider. We were able to displace them with our technology. So a customer like Sweden has been running technology like this for 20, 25 years, and SuperCom was able to come along and show them a much higher value proposition, which allowed us to win the RFP and replace the entire system that the old provider had. We're also in the U.S. entering through the counties at this point, whether it's in Northern California or South California, and Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Wisconsin. We're entering into more and more counties, and there's huge opportunities in the U.S. Because of this, we started hiring, a sales and marketing team. Before that, most of the wins were through RFPs, through writing proposals to public, competitive government procurement processes. Now we're actually going to a lot of these counties, and we have feet on the ground chasing more opportunities in the U.S. We announced that just in the last quarter, we had 15 new opportunities of customers in the U.S. that want to demo and evaluate our technology, which to them seems quite exciting compared to what they're used to in the industry. For the next slide, we'll see that the COVID pandemic had some changes in the industry. Firstly, it's very hard to maintain social distancing within close quarters, like a prison. And we saw a huge uptick worldwide. Roughly, Bloomberg states 25 to 30% increase in the amount of ankle bracelets being deployed a few months after the pandemic broke out. And, a lot of communities and lawyers and defendants are pushing to keep their personnel on house arrest rather than in prisons. And you see that the population currently in the U.S., over 2 million incarcerated Americans. All of that is our potential market that could inflow into house arrest. And we discussed earlier why there's many benefits to maintaining people on house arrest or offender monitoring. So COVID has actually created continuous growth and tailwinds to the industry. Also, around COVID, we were able to offer a unique solution which leverages our existing technology but is adapted to the needs of COVID quarantine. So as someone is required to quarantine for 7, 10, 14 days, many governments around the world, especially in the Middle East and South America or in Asia, want to enforce that quarantine just like they enforce a speeding ticket. And so in Israel, we did a pilot where people who entered the international airport and were required to quarantine put on a bracelet at their choice. They had to choose between a Corona hotel and a bracelet. They put on a bracelet, they went home, and they were able to prove to the government that they actually were staying at home throughout their quarantine time. We won that RFP, and before the project went live, even though we started integration, there were elections in Israel, and now there's a new government. And so we're working on educating them with the technology, with the solution. Hopefully we can get them comfortable to relaunch this project. It's a very interesting win for the company because at the amount of units they're talking about, over 15,000, it would generate over $3 million a month, which is essentially 3 times what the company is currently doing based on 2020 numbers. That's all for the IoT market. If we look at our secure identification and cybersecurity markets for a moment, even though they each comprise of $2 million annually, it's a smaller portion of our revenues. But secure identification market is roughly $20 billion. And we're a small player in the market. But in the past, let's say in 2015, all the revenues from SuperCom, 30 million or so, were from this market. The IoT tracking revenues were zero or close to zero in 2015. So over the last few years, this market, our revenues from this market went from 30 million down to roughly 2 million. But some of that decline was mitigated by the growth in IoT from zero or close to zero revenues to 8 million or so in 2020. In this market, we have a solution which offers the ability for governments to effectively authenticate and issue credentials, whether it be driver licenses, biometric passports, and other government services. While we don't focus as much these days on this, the references we have here are extremely strong because we can go to new governments we never worked with, such as Italy or the UK, and show them, look, we've done these projects which require national participation, national governments with very sensitive data, and we're able to implement them successfully with a over 30-year track record. And we use that as part of our application and submitting process, and that helps us win, especially over companies who have less experience bidding internationally, like some of our competitors who have only bid in the U.S. For their entire track record. And lastly, our cybersecurity division. So here we have essentially technology proprietary developed with high gross margins, which runs on endpoints to enterprises. We sell to banks, we sell to hospitals, we sell to investor institutions, law firms. And these are very sticky customers that have been with the company for many years. And this business generates positive cash flow with very high margins. We'll be using the cash to invest in our IoT tracking and Defender tracking division because that is our main focus and area of growth. But there's very strong standing here with our existing customers that we can use to deploy additional modules in the future if we want to invest and grow our revenues from cybersecurity as well. Here you can see some of the summary financial info. Q1 was similar to Q2. We beat consensus estimates by a bit. Revenues were $3.1 million, gross profit of $3.5 million, and EBITDA of $1.3 million. You can see here the reconciliation from net income to EBITDA. And our cash at the end of Q2 is roughly $11 million, cash and restricted cash, total assets of $50 million, and liabilities of $40 million. The stock has been quite volatile, and every time we announce new projects, there is some movement. We hope to announce more projects because, as you can see, over the past years, we've been continuously winning more bids and expanding into more locations. So in summary, around SuperCom, we are a provider of IoT tracking, secure identification, and cybersecurity solutions. We have been expanding rapidly with over 30 multi-year government projects since 2018. Our technology has been leading to over 65% win rate in Europe. And we have new customized solutions for the COVID pandemic and the environment we live in today. Our steady state recurring revenues represent over 83% of our total 2020 revenues, giving us a very stable and predictable revenue base. And we're expanding our footprint within multi-billion-dollar end markets with very high barriers to entry. You have to show references before bidding on any of these projects. You have to be a player. Our EBITDA has been slightly increasing, and we've had $1.3 million for the first half of the year and 18% insider ownership. So, of course, the stock value is very important to management. Before I get into Q&A here, just show one last slide, which shows some of our competitors in the space. You can see Track Group, BI, Omnilink, Attenti. They trade anywhere between 2 and 6 times revenue multiples. And we think as we clear up financial reporting, over the past few years, there were some delays, but we reported our 2020 annual financials, audited financials on time, as well as Q1 and Q2, which we released 10 days ago. And we've cleaned up a lot of that. We plan to continue reporting effectively. And as we rebuild our investor base, hope to have more appropriate multiples for our business. Thank you very much for listening. At this point, I'm just going to open up to Q&A. Okay, so first question by Robert Kraft. When looking at the competitive landscape, he asks, is there a larger player that you aspire to be? Good question. There are 10 players in the industry. We know them very well. Our technology has scored much higher than many others, so we're not aspiring to have their technology, but we would like to grow in the industry. Of course, a lot of these players have been around for 20, 30 years, and they have put their positioning in large contracts, whether it's California or Florida or the UK, and then we have slowly been displacing them on the smaller projects like Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, and then we've been growing in size. Again, because of the reference issue, you have to show these governments that you've done other projects of similar scope and size. So over the next few years, we have been shifting our focus to growth, and we're going to focus on our sales team, which we never had in the past few years, to grow our revenues in many more locations and expand our global footprint. And the more we win projects, the more we develop our R&D capabilities and our technology, the more we have the likelihood to win the larger projects and the largest projects in the industry. So that's some of our goal over the next 3 to 5 years. Next question here is from Randall. Can you talk about the cash flow life cycle as you implement a new customer win? Sure. We mentioned a few times before, when we win a new project, first of all, the projects are very high gross margins because the cost for the equipment is much less than the revenues we would generate over the 5 years, which is usually the project's life cycle. But the first 6 months to 12 months are cash flow negative because we have to manufacture all these tags, purchase all these smartphones, then connect them, and then we start putting them on offenders. The business model industry is one of the least and software as a service. So you have recurring revenues, which are very sticky, and you have great margins, but upfront you have to put at least some cash. And that's why we've been able to leverage the credit markets, and we have roughly $11 million of cash through the credit markets that allow us to deploy these projects effectively. So the first 6 to 12 months will be cash flow negative on a project, and then positive. Because we've been implementing larger and larger projects, we're still getting weighed down by the negative cash flows from the new projects over the positive from the past. But over time, that should reach equilibrium and have positive cash flow altogether. So Randall, another question, describe management team background. Happy to do so. So I myself, first of all, Don Trabelsi, I've been the global CEO since February of 2020. Beforehand, I was the CEO in the Americas for SuperCom since 2013 when I joined. I was essentially the second employee. Revenues there were close to nothing, and I was able to grow the business to close to $10 million over the years there. I moved here to take a global perspective on things. Our focus has been more and more towards developed markets in U.S., Canada, and Europe. And we're going to try to do the same thing we did in the U.S., also in Europe and other developed economies around the world. The rest of the management team, my background before that, MBA from Columbia University, and beforehand, computer engineering at the Technion out of Israel, and worked in cybersecurity. Many of the other team members here have been in the military in Israel in cybersecurity or other departments around security and security technology. And we also have experienced senior management, whether it's in VP sales or operation directors, who are from the industry of electronic monitoring of offenders. They've been doing this for many years in the U.S. or in Europe, and they've come from our competitors over to us. And more we see that players or employees who are stars or other competitors want to move over because we're seen as a rising star in sorts in the industry. Since we keep winning a lot of these projects, our technology is performing very well. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. That's all the questions for today. Thanks for joining the call, and have a good rest of the conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, this does conclude SuperCom presentation. Thank you for joining. You may now disconnect.